とは言ってくれるじゃねえか。どう？お前が言うほどでもないさ。俺は十分頭にきてる。お前らのやってきたことを考えてみろ。
What's up, everybody? OP09 is officially here, and we're celebrating by playing one of the strongest decks in the format. We're playing Doflamingo here at Locals, and man, do I have a game for you guys. This is the Doflamingo Mirror match. If you've played a Dofi Mirror match before, you know how painful they are, and man, this one is going to be a ton of fun, as my opponent and I are just going to go back and forth here. I did end up losing the dice roll going first here, but I did find the Perona, as well as I found 2 Martial D Teaches, and 2 Weevils in hand here. Likely I have a pretty good gameplay for the next few turns. Likely just going to be slamming down the Martial D Teach and putting the Weevils into play off the top of my deck here. Opponent's going to play out a Buggy and look at the top 3. I think my opponent was commenting that they didn't, talking about the Perona, we're kind of matching each other, but mine is slightly better, right? The Buggy looks at the top 3, Perona looks at the top 5, but Buggy is a 2K, where Perona is not here. We found another 2K in hand that I kept that on top because I wasn't going to be grabbing that off the top. Instead, we're going to play the Martial D Teach. We're going to activate Teach here. We're going to attach 2 to lead. Well, first we got to put something on top, and then we're going to attach 2 to lead, and then have a nice little way to put our Weevils into play, get them out of hand, and put them into play. Instead, we're going to go with 7K at lead. We're going to activate. We're going to put that Weevil into play. We're going to draw another card here. That card is going to become very useful later in the game, and that card is Jozu, one of the new additions to the deck. The deck has been running this, I think, since OPO 8.5. But Jozu, just a fantastic card. Not only is it fantastic in this mirror, but it's also fantastic against other decks like Purple Luffy. Not so good against Shanks. Yes, Shanks runs some low-cost blockers, but other than that, if Shanks is running like the mid-range version that has like the Marcos and the Rayleighs and the Lucky Brews, the Jozu's not too bad, but the Jozu shines a little bit more in matchups like this one. So being a 7K body is very strong here. Opponent on their 4-Dawn turn, likely going to show me something scary, and yep, they're going to show me a Jinbei into a Law here. Law's going to bounce the Weevil back to my hand. That's fine. I've got a Weevil to put back into play again off the Teach here, as I'm just going to keep doing that every single turn, and I'm going to counter out of that 5K swing with lead with just the extra Teach that I've got in play here. Teach being a Teach is a very solid card if you want to be really aggressive. And this allows me now, I can tap 4, we can play 1 Weevil, draw a card, and then we can go ahead and activate Teach, put the other Weevil on top, attach 2, and then go ahead and swing 7 at lead, and then be able to play another Weevil, and then draw another card here. Now we've got 2 Jozus, a Red Rock, and a 2K, as well as a 3rd copy of Martial D Teach. Believe it or not, in my whole time playing Locals, right, I played a few rounds, I didn't see any Martial D Teaches. This is the first game I saw a Martial D Teach, and I saw it perfectly on curve on turn 2. And man, it's been a little crazy, and it's allowing me to get very aggressive against the Doflamingo here in this specific matchup. This matchup can get a little wonky and can get a little stalematy, but Martial D Teach does kind of let me push slightly ahead here, though at the disadvantage of giving me a little less cards in hand since it is a card from hand. But luckily, putting Weevils into play kind of negates that disadvantage here. Opponent's going to go ahead and play out a Buggy. Buggy's going to look top 3. Try to find something nice to put on top for leader ability, as my opponent is on their 6-Dawn turn. Opponent's going to have a few Dawn left over here. Could potentially see a swing into Weevil, but likely going to see a swing go into face here to keep us at parity. I'm at 5 life, and they are at 4 here. One thing you'll notice is my opponent has seen a Jinbei, and I have not seen the Jinbei here. Opponent's going to just attach the rest of the Dawn. I think that's going to be a 10K swing into 6 here, and going to play out a Moria. Moria is going to find, I believe, back a 2K Mihawk here, or the Law. Yep, going to see a 4-cost Law go back into hand here, and my Weevil is gone. But that is no attacks at face here at this specific time. Well, now we're going to Jinbei going at face here, and we could counter out of that with a Teach. Opponent's going to have a Jinbei and a Law to attack with here. And I'm going to take that second hit, going down to 4, and we find ourselves a Law as well. Now my hand is getting pretty interactive, right? Almost every card, speaking of which, Raging Tiger, another great card for the mirror match here. Almost every single one of my cards in my hand either get rid of something or in some way, whether it's bottom decking or bouncing. We're going to go ahead and send 5 at the Law here. to try to bait some counter out of my opponent's hand, and my opponent's going to do exactly that, going to counter out of it here, and then we're going to swing a 6 into the lull, see if my opponent gives me another card. If my opponent gave me one card, likely they're going to give me another, but my opponent decides not to take the bait and goes ahead and doesn't counter out of it. We're going to use the Gravity Blade to clean up the rest of my opponent's board, so pretty nice interaction there. I was able to get one card from my opponent's hand, as well as get 2 cards off the board here. Not too shabby in the mirror, right? So the idea is to be the more interactive opponent, to have the a little more on board into every turn, because most turns are just going to be each of you, right? You putting things into play and killing things, and your opponent putting things into play and killing your board. Gets a little stalematey. So hopefully we can kind of maintain our advantage here into this turn here. Opponent at 9 Dawn here, going to go ahead and swing 6k into lead here. I'm going to go ahead and counter out of it. Then my opponent's going to play their own Gravity Blade here, and bottom deck my Teach as well as my Weevil. This feels very familiar. So, Gravity Blade for Gravity Blade here. This is the Doflamingo Mirror. We're going to go up to, actually, sorry, my opponent was at 8 Dawn last turn. I'm going to go up to 9 Dawn here, and then we could play out the Jozu, right, as just a value play. Especially now that my opponent showed me that they used a Gravity Blade. Maybe it's unlikely that they have a second one here. We're going to go ahead and bounce the Jozu, and we're not going to return the Buggy. It's an up to ability, so you can return up to one of your things, and then if you do return up to one of your opponent's things, I chose to return 0. Instead, we're going to go for a blind swing. We end up flipping a Perona off the top, but swinging 7k at lead here. Opponent only has 4 cards in hand, likely not going to give me two cards to counter out of it here, and we're going to send it back to my opponent's turn. Opponent's at 3 life. I am at 4. I have 2 lulls, a Jozu, and a Red Rock, as well as a Perona to set up my top 5. Things are looking pretty nice, though if you notice, I haven't seen any Jinbeis or Boas yet, so we'll see if my opponent can be the keeper of Jinbeis here as we go into this next turn. Opponent going to go ahead and tap 6, going to go ahead and Red Rock my Jozu. Feel familiar? Yeah, I've got a Red Rock in hand as well. It feels like we're basically taking turns doing the same things here, and my opponent has 4 more Dawn left up here. Could potentially see one of the scariest plays is a Jinbei here. My opponent separating 1 basically means that they're going to go for a leader swing instead to play out another Buggy, look at the top 3, and rearrange those potentially into something that my opponent wants to put in play here. Find something, and then going to go ahead and attach 2. Going to go ahead and swing 7 at lead, and then activate effect. And they're going to put a Boa into play. That's pretty gross. I didn't really want to see a Boa at this point, but especially now that I haven't seen a Boa, but it is what it is. So likely what we can do here is just play the Perona into the Jozu to bounce the Boa, and then we'll still have enough on top of enough Dawn to attach to and swing lead. Opponent's going to swing 8k lead. I'm just going to go ahead and take that, as my hand is pretty low in counter. No 2Ks in hand, and a lot of things that I actually want to play here. We end up finding a second Perona, so we're going to just do the play. We're going to play out the Perona. Perona's going to look top 5. We're going to look for a juicy target to put in play here. We found ourselves a pair of Boas that we want to put in play as well, and we're going to go ahead and stack it in such a way that we can do that. So I think what we're going to do, have the Boa on top, put a 2K in the middle to draw for turn, and then have another Boa to put into play off of a leader attack. On the following turn here, we're going to tap 6, play out the Jozu. Jozu's going to bounce my Perona and go ahead and bounce the Boa back to hand. Boa is not a counter, right? A counterless card, so I don't mind it going back into my opponent's hand, even though it does have a ability here. We're going to look top 3. We already had top 3 situated the way we wanted it to be, so we're just going to swing 8k at lead here. That's going to force at least 2Ks out of my opponent's hand, so likely my opponent's just going to take it here. And we're still sitting at 3. Opponent's sitting at 2. I have, again, a bit of a board, and my opponent just has some buggies. So, feeling pretty good here. It's still got a Red Rock in hand in case my opponent does something crazy. I know a lot of Doflamingo decks run different kind of tech. Some run 6-cost Boa, some run the 9-cost Mihawk, some run the 9-cost Sanjis. So having that Red Rock kind of just sitting in hand waiting for a target does make me feel a little safe going into these later turns in the game here, as my opponent's at 10 Dawn here with 6 cards in hand. There's a few things that, I kind of hate to see another Gravity Blade here, as Jozu does get Gravity Bladed. My opponent's instead going to play one of those cards that I was feeling safe against, and that is a Boa. So 6-cost Boa is going to come down, going to stop my Jozu from attacking on this next turn, which is a little unfortunate, as Jozu was going to be a great way to keep punishing my opponent for not having much of a board, but instead that bow is going to come down. Likely that bow is just going to eat a red rock on this next turn, as I know I have a bow on top that I can flip into play off of Doflamingo's effect here. Opponent's going to play down that bow I sent back to their hand. Going to go ahead and look top 3 and then attach a Dawn to their leader. And we'll see here what my opponent decides to do. Could leave some cards on top, could throw them on the bottom instead if they're not what they're looking for. But I already have a pretty solid plan into this next turn as to what I want to do. Opponent decides to put it on top, and then likely just going to swing either a 6k into my lead or a 6k into... And so my opponent's leader didn't tap, but my opponent did swing 6k at me. So I went ahead and countered out of it with my 2 Peronas. And we're going to go back to my turn here. We end up picking a buggy here. I'm going to put a little die on my Jozu so I remember not to swing with it. And we're going to go ahead and likely what we're going to do is we're going to red rock and then likely just going to swing maybe 7-7, right? 7 with Hancock, 7 with Doflamingo, and then use Doflamingo's effect to put another Hancock into play. Something like that. We'll see if I can do it properly. What are you doing with the Dawn? Right, that 2 Dawn, it's going under Dofi, right? We're going to do Dofi first. Oh, no, what have you done? So I completely goofed here. And I goofed. I didn't even realize I goofed until I had swung with it. And then you can see I goofed so hard that I slapped the camera out of frustration. But I did it wrong. I meant to attach 2 to lead, activate lead's effect, and then have one of the arrested Dawn from the boa coming into play to attach to the other boa. So I should have swung with lead first and then swung with boa. I would have had 1 more character on board. But I unfortunately made a bit of a misplay there. I missequenced. Which can happen. This deck is not easy to play, especially now that it's added a few more tools to it. So that's me punting pretty hard there. But otherwise, I mean, we still got a damage in as well as a boa blocker down as well. So kind of feeling pretty good into this board here. We've got our 7k Jozu that's going to be able to attack on this next turn, as well as we've got a lull to put into play if my opponent decides to block her up. But we're going to see here what my opponent decides to do. Opponent's going to tap 4. We're going to play a Jinbei into a Doflamingo blocker. Haven't seen that one in a while. I know a lot of lists have been cutting the 3-cost blocker just because there's just not as much room in the deck anymore now that the starter decks come out. But it's still a nice little addition. Some Dofis feel a little more comfortable running more than 4 blockers. So I know it is a fine play, but with adding anything new to anything additional to the deck, you really have to think about what you need to cut, just because the deck list is just absolutely so tight. But we'll see what my opponent does here. Opponent's going to stack to the top 5, and now they've got 6 more Dawn to work with here. Please no more boas, right? Don't show me another 6-cost boa, because I do not have an answer for that one, and that could potentially look a little scary here. But I do have an answer for the blocker. If I wanted to, I could play the lull out and bounce the blocker. We could play the buggy out to look at top 3 and try to rearrange here, but we know there's going to be a boa coming off the top. Opponent's going to attack with a ton of Dawn. That's at least 9 Dawn. 9k? No, it's more than 9k. 10k? 11k? Something like that. They attach the rest of the Dawn. They're going to swing that into my boa. Then they're going to play a Jinbei off the top, putting a Weevil into play, and my opponent has a full board here. And I'm feeling a little scared now, and really hitting myself, wishing I had the boa on board. If I had the boa on board, my plays would have gotten a little bit easier on this next turn, potentially, as my opponent only had 1 swing into my board here, and I could have had another boa. That boa could have swung 7k. We could have done like 7k, and then maybe another 8k or something like that to try to pressure my opponent's hand or pressure my opponent's board here. We're going to play out the lull here. Lull's going to bounce the Doflamingo back to hand and bounce himself back to hand. And then now we've got a 7k going at lead here. I'm feeling like relatively okay, like into my opponent's board. I'm still at 3 life. I'm going to go 7k. My opponent shows me 3 cards. And we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and swing another 7k and then put a Crocodile into play here. And my opponent took that last hit. After showing me 3 cards, pretty much guaranteed to me that they didn't have any 2ks in hand. So if I had that other boa on board, I potentially could have robbed my opponent of more cards from hand in that specific turn. But now we're kind of sitting at this weird situation where, yes, my opponent could they could try to go for game here if they really wanted to, but I've got 4k in hand with 3 life. What are the odds that I hit a few 2ks? It could definitely happen. But sorry, Thought I heard screaming or something. Sorry, I've got little kids. Sometimes it can happen. You can hear, you know, it's night. I usually record these once the day is over, and the kids are already in bed. So sometimes I think the monitor is like up the stairs right next to it, and sometimes I can hear my daughter yelling, which happens. She is a baby after all. Opponent's still thinking on what they want to do here. They could potentially just start pressuring game. Opponent's going to instead just go ahead and attach a few, likely just going at the crocodile here and then putting something into play. Just puts a teach into play, just a value play. And they can activate teach. The opponent was asking me if they could activate teach. Teach does not require you to rest it, so you can activate it to still put something on top of your deck and still attach to 2k. Opponent swings, I think that was 8k at my lead. I decided to take it because I would have had to use my whole hand to counter of it. Was really hoping for a 2k here, but didn't find one. I do still have the boa blocker on board as well, so not feeling, again, too scared here. Opponent's going to go ahead and swing at 9k here. I think that Jinbei should have tapped, but you know what it means. We're as long as we're both on the same page, that's all that matters when it comes to the game state. It's his locals after all. It's not a big deal. All right, going to me here, and I think we can finish the game here. We've got the lull. My opponent has no blockers, and my only have 4 cards in hand. We're going to just go ahead and send 17 to lead here. We're going to take care of my opponent here. The game was pretty back and forth, but ended up taking it home. With that in mind, if you like this type of content, definitely subscribe. I'll be dropping a deck list here soon in the next few days of this Doflamingo build. So, yeah, with that in mind, have a good night.